In today's video, I'm going to show you how to count out loud in most music for the piano that you will experience as a beginner or a late beginner. So counting out loud is when you verbalize the rhythm. This is basically when you say numbers and syllables and words and whatnot, and you're going to correlate that with your playing, and you're going to be considering the rhythm and time signature of the piece while you do this. This is somewhat of a difficult skill to acquire because it takes a lot of practice for it to actually be useful for you, and a lot of students never actually reach that point. But this is one of the best investments that you can make in your overall musicianship, and it affects your sight reading, it affects how fast you learn music, it affects everything. It's ridiculously important. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for you to pick up this skill and get good at it, okay? Regardless of what anyone tells you. We are going to use counting out loud to make sure that notes are correctly proportional to one another and that the rhythm is correct. And we will also use counting to basically achieve a sense of flow in our music. So we are actually going to use it to bring a sense of musicality to the music that might not otherwise exist. A lot of people complain that the counting takes away from the music, but there's really just a time and a place for it, right? It's best used early in the learning process, at least in the way that we're talking about it today. We want to use it early on in the learning process, before the metronome enters the scene, and we want to make sure everything's correct and proportional and get the thing off the ground and get those fundamentals in place, right? I like to call it learning the rules before you break them. We want to learn the structure and the skeleton of the piece, the rhythm, the most important thing when you move, when you do certain things, and we're going to choreograph our various syllables and all kinds of things with that, and that's going to give us a lot of control, and it's going to give us a lot of other benefits. So in just a minute, I'm going to show you how to count using a lot of different musical examples. And everything is basically beginner or late beginner level, I guess inching a little bit towards the intermediate, but that's really just to show you, as many things as I can because I want us to experience a broad variety of musical patterns. So this video will be fairly comprehensive for what it's worth. But I also wanted to mention that all of the music that I'm going to show you in this video is actually from my Flex Lessons Piano Academy. And so this is part of my curriculum for beginners, to be specific. So if you are an adult beginner or you are even an intermediate pianist and you're looking for something structured and classically focused and you want the opportunity to get feedback on your playing, which is like the most important thing, right? To have a teacher actually watch your playing and give you suggestions and guide you, I would love for you to join this program. If you want to learn more about this, check out the pinned comment below. With that said, let's go ahead and get to some musical examples. So this is the first piece that I have pretty much every student play once they know how to read music. So it's a very basic piece. You just have quarter notes, half notes, and whole notes, and we all have to start somewhere. And so I'm going to use this just to kind of remind you about how counting works. I'm assuming you have some experience, otherwise you probably wouldn't have clicked on this video, and I'm going to try to fill in any holes as they come up. So the first thing we want to look at when we get to a piece of music is we want to look at the time signature, and we want to figure out, just kind of looking around, what kinds of notes do we have? And how is that going to work with our time signature? So the time signature in this case is 4/4. The top number of the time signature is referring to the number of counts or beats in a measure, and the bottom number is referring to what type of note gets the beat. And just so you know, the 4 really is referring to a fourth or a quarter, and so the quarter note is going to get the beat. So if you imagine a 1 over the bottom number, that helps you kind of visualize what the 4 is actually referring to, because sometimes people just say, oh, 4 equals quarter, but I don't know why. But it equals quarter because it's a fourth, just like a 2 would be half and an 8 would be an 8 would be an eighth note, right? So you can count half notes, you can count eighth notes, and in this case, you're going to count a quarter note. And it's actually fairly simple. We don't have any kind of other kinds of notes in here outside of quarter notes, half notes, and whole notes. There's nothing that's going to require us to use any weird syllables just yet, right? We'll use those when we subdivide. And by the way, subdivision is when you break the beat down further. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But we don't have to do that here yet. So we are just going to write in regular numbers. And of course, we're going to start over after we cross the bar line. Okay, so that's just a basic example. I'll write one more in. And then we're going to speak this rhythm while we play. Yes, I recognize it's going to take some brain power to do that. So what should you do if you feel like you're overburdened with the layering of the syllables on top of the playing. What should you do? Just slow down. Go like half the speed. How slow can you go? I bet you're not going slow enough if you're complaining about not being able to get this to work. So slow down. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I know I'm making it look easy because I've been practicing this for many years and I'm pretty good at it, I'd like to say. But it's an acquired skill and you have to practice it a lot. And if you can play a lot harder stuff than this, but you can't count yet or you don't know how to use counting, this is still where you want to start because you want to find something where you can practice things while they're easy. You don't want to wait to get to a very difficult piece that has a very complicated rhythm that you can't solve without counting, but you don't know how to count, you don't have any practice with it. Well, then counting's not going to help you in that situation and you're not going to like it. So we don't want that. And when you're better at it, you can count faster. And at some point, the numbers are just going to roll off the tongue. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's counting out loud in a nutshell. It's really not hard. Let's go to another musical example. This is a little bit more involved because it has more different kinds of notes, right? Actually, it has rests. We have a quarter rest right here. That's a thing to become aware of. And I want to mention this specifically because you still count rests. Just because you don't play something doesn't mean you stop measuring. Your counting is your measuring. So we're measuring, we're controlling and really understanding that pulse. So we're still going to speak the rhythm for when we have a rest. So let me actually back up and give you some context. Actually, you know what? Not yet. I'm just going to start right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I stop playing on 4, but I don't not say the word 4. A lot of people they'll go like 1, 2, 3. I don't know what to do because there's a rest. You still count. Your metronome still works. You still work, right? Your brain still works. Keep counting. What else do we need to do in this piece? Let's look at C. Oh yeah, there's a lot of rests and things at the end, so we can actually look at that in just a second. All right, so looking at the beginning of the piece, I'll just write in a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 for your rest, and so on. Okay? And that's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, actually, you know what? Speaking of rests, let me just say, the note, so if you have a rest, the note before the rest is going to go right to the point where you say the number. So I'm going to slow that down. I think it's going to make sense to you. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to go right. That quarter note lasts the whole beat 3. 3, 4. Once I say 4, we are now in beat 4. The rest starts. And then nothing happens until the next one, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so on. That's how we get this off the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. And also, if you count here, you can choreograph your movement of your position change, right? So if I'm going like this, 1, 2, 3, move. Except for I'm moving on 4. So I'll say 4 and I'll move at that same time. So let's go to the end here and explain some of these rests. We have a nice long whole note, 4 counts. And then we have a slur, right? That's just indicating to connect. Then we have a quarter rest. That's on beat 2. Then we have this. This is a half rest. It just basically looks like a little box. 3, 4. And just so you know, the box can actually hang down from the other direction. In that case, it's basically going to fill a whole measure, or it'll occupy 4 beats. So check this out. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so on, okay? I'm pointing this out to you because students are notorious, especially when they don't count, for shortening things. And when you shorten things, it makes it sound less musical and also less mature. I'm going to show you I'm going to show you a demonstration real quick of this without me counting, but I'm going to be counting in my head, and just check out how long it is. So let me give you some context by playing the previous 2 measures. So starting right there. Here we go. I'll do that again with counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Right? A student who's not counting is unlikely going to come up with that. Unlikely to come up with that. All right. This is where things get a little bit more interesting. This is where we introduce the concept of subdivision. So subdivision is when you break a beat down further. In this case, we have eighth notes. So eighth notes are worth half of what a quarter note would be. And another way to think of the eighth note relative to the quarter note is we're splitting the beat. We're splitting the quarter note two ways. So in 4/4, where every count that you say, 1, 2, 3, 4, every count, every word that, or every number that you say is a quarter note, each of those beats can be split two ways when you're counting the eighth note. And so in other words, we actually have to come up with an additional word to track that. So this is where we introduce the word and. That's the most common, or it's one of the most common words to use. And the symbol that I use for that, and I think most people use it for that, is the plus symbol. So this is what that's going to look like. So this is your eighth note, your eighth note playing. 1 and 2 and 3. Okay, so this is subdivision, right? But this is the important part. What I'm about to explain is the important part of understanding how to use subdivision to actually get things correct. If you go 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1, okay, which a lot of people do, that was totally wrong. Why was it wrong? Because I didn't actually consider the proportionality of my quarter note against my eighth notes. What happens when you start counting the eighth note? By the way, when you're in 4/4 time and you're saying 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you're not saying 4 things per measure, you're saying 8 things per measure. You're doubling the resolution by which you're understanding the measure, if that makes any sense. That means that every word you say, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, represents an eighth note, which means that the quarter note now needs to be thought of as having 2 counts, not 1, when you're subdividing. So it's very important, at least in the beginning. Later on, you don't have to do this, but until you can really trust how steady your pulse is, you need to do what I refer to as fully subdividing, which means you subdivide the notes that don't need to be subdivided. So you're going to feel 2 things on the quarter instead of 1 thing on the quarter, and that's going to completely reorient everything, and it's also going to help you slow down. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's how that will work. Let's look at a harder part of this piece, actually just the second line really. So if you look right here, a lot of students are going to do this. They're going to go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3. Okay, not right, because we didn't consider the proportion of the eighth note to the quarter note on these quarter notes. We have to say and think 2 things per each of the quarter notes. Ridiculously important. It's useless if you don't do this, at least at first. And then when you go through here, I'll show you this in just a second, you can also do some other cool things to make sure that these rhythms are right. And another thing I need to introduce to you is this idea of a dotted note, right? We can have dotted notes, and dotted notes, I think the official term for it is augmentation dot. The dot is going to be to the right of the note, not above or below, and it's going to multiply the note value by 1.5. So if a quarter note is worth 2 eighth notes, then a dotted quarter note is going to be worth 3 eighth notes. And just so you know, a fast way to thinking about this is a dotted any kind of note is worth 3 of whatever it breaks down into. So if it's a dotted half note, it's worth 3 quarter notes. If it's a dotted quarter note, it's worth 3 eighth notes. If it's a dotted eighth note, it's worth 3 16th notes, and so on. Okay? So if we do this, actually let me write it, I'm going to write it in the middle. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So we're actually going to say 3 words on our dotted quarter, and that's important. And also note that there's a dot here. That's a staccato dot. So I have a tip for you, unrelated to counting, but it is helpful in the learning process, and that is when you have a piece that's got, staccato and legato, staccato being very short notes, legato being very connected notes. When you play them slowly, that's just for the learning process, play your staccato notes really, really short and play your legato notes infinitely long, held fully until the next note happens, so that you can observe the what should be a very large contrast between the two notes, between the two types of notes. It's very helpful for choreographing things. This is very helpful for people who say they can't play with both their hands at the same time, or they can't coordinate it, right? They can't get both hands going. This is the solution, because many pieces have running eighth notes while they have quarter notes and their staccatos and things like that. And this is basically the way that you can deal with it. So this piece is actually a good example of that. It's actually why I picked it. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Okay, so this part really gets tricky. I'm going to do that very slow. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and is a great way to learn this. 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Sped up, it sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. And that's basically how you play that piece or anything like it. Very helpful in my opinion. All right, so this next piece is a test of how well you can subdivide. I picked this piece for my program because it's particularly punishing for students that don't count, because there are a lot of tied notes and subdivided rhythms and long notes and rests and things like that. Let's talk about the tied note real quick. A tie looks like this. So here's a slur. And actually, just so you know, from what I'm aware, this is kind of a ambiguous thing, but from what I'm aware of, the slur that occupies multiple measures at a time is actually referred to as a phrase marking. But slurs and phrase markings are kind of used interchangeably. But basically, the idea here is that this is all a phrase, and also it's supposed to be connected, and it's got a high arch. But you'll notice the tie, there's two things that we're really looking for it to be a tie, because the slur and the tie kind of look similar. The arch for the tie is a lot lower than the arch for the slur. And also, a tie always has to connect two notes of the same pitch. So if it's not the same pitch, then it doesn't matter how high the arch is because it's not a tie. But if it's two notes of the same pitch and it's like a really high arch, especially when it encompasses particularly when it encompasses other notes, it's not a tie. But when it's real low like this and it's just connecting the two notes of the same pitch, it's a tie, which means you add the note values together, which means this is a 5-beat note. And this is challenging because we have eighth notes, which means we got to consider all of that. Instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, that would give us our 5 pulses. We would say 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. And we need to do that in order to make sure that the rhythm is proportional. So this piece is a great test of that. Let me show you what this sounds like. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Right? Not particularly hard, but let's actually we're gonna start right here. Look, we have staccatos, we have eighth notes. Generally, as a rule of thumb, especially at the beginner range, it's a good habit to, by default, go ahead and count using whatever smallest note value you regularly see. So in this piece and in the previous piece, we have eighth notes. That's the smallest note value. So we have to think of everything in terms of the eighth note for everything to be proportional. That's what we're doing when we do this, subdividing. And I'm drawing it this specific way so that you can see 3 words to that dotted quarter. And then finally, we have our and there. Okay? This is easy. 1 and 2 and, oops. 3 and 4 and, okay? Going on, 1 and 2 and 3 and, can't write today. Okay, I think you get the idea. So let me show you this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and hold the note until the rest. 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then we get to the tricky part right here. So let me math this out for you. We're going to show our work We have a half rest down here. 3 and 4. I didn't leave enough space. 4 and also that's a tie. 1 and then this happens on 2. And then you have another tie. So this is actually a pretty tricky piece for beginners, even though it doesn't really have a lot going on. It's a very confined position, but rhythmically it's challenging. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and see, I'm holding the E's still because they're both tied on both hands. Nothing happens on one. You don't do anything. You don't move or anything. The most common thing students get wrong on this piece is this part. But they never get it wrong if they just go through this process. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. You can see right here your tied note, 1 and. So if I show you that again, I'll go a little faster. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and off. That's how to actually count that. From my experience, it's highly unlikely to be that unless the student actually went through this process. It almost never happens. Check this out. I'm going to play it without counting. Just count in my head. Right? So that length, students are definitely afraid of long notes when they first start out. So the counting will give you the courage to actually hold the note long enough. Wildly helpful. All right, so now we have the famous minuet in G major, BWV 114 from the Anna Magdalena notebook, right? Right. And so I wanted to use this piece to just very briefly talk about ornaments, just very loosely, very quickly, because it's not a subject we're going to get into in depth. But especially at the beginner level, you're going to play a lot of like Baroque type of pieces with ornaments. And, so here's an ornament, right? This is what we call a lower mordant. You know this because it's a little squiggly line and it's got a slash through the middle. So what that tells us is that this note is going to actually be a C, B, C right before. And it's going to be very quick. Now, I might be wrong about this because I'm not a musicologist and I'm not by any stretch of the imagination any kind of expert in Baroque ornamentation or anything like that. But the standard way to play, I'm pretty sure, and the way I was taught, the standard way to play Baroque ornaments is to do them on the beat, not before the beat. So a lot of people play this 1 and 2, right? So what I just did there, I'm using this piece to talk to you just very quickly about how ornaments and counting can work together. But we kind of need to understand where is the mordant, the extra 2 notes that we're going to add, where is that going to come from? Where is it going to come from this note? Because we can't add any time, right? We can't add any time. We need to make sure that this is rhythmically sound. There can't be any extra things added. Is it going to come from that, or is it going to come from this? The first arrow is what happens if it comes before the beat. It would sound like this. 1 and 2. 1 and 2, right? Where you're done with it by the time you say 2. The second one is going to come from the C itself, which means you don't start the mordant until you arrive at the C. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. I thought that was a very helpful distinction or a clarification for you at this point, because you are going to start to see these little things still in the range of beginner, late beginner, and probably early intermediate, right? You're going to see these types of things. So I thought that was important. Here's another thing. Now, I don't have a good answer for this. I have to admit, this is like an appoggiatura, but it's not played like it looks. In many different editions where you like go and pay for an edition of music and the editor has drawn like another little box above, like right here. And what they'll typically do is they'll draw a little box that says quarter note, half note. I'm honestly not sure why that is, because this is inconsistent with how I've looked at how I've studied other appoggiaturas. So Feel free to enlighten me in the comments if you know for sure, but I am just going to explain how this is most commonly played, or how I hear it most commonly played, which is just how I just explained, where you think of this note as a quarter note, and you're going to think of this note as a half note, which means this note, if you're going to interpret it this way, lines up with that note. So you would, and you got to keep your full subdivision going. 1 and 2, and which means the A and the left-hand D are going to come together. 1 and 2 and 3, and by the way, no beginner student seems to want to go this slow, but if you do go this slow, it's pretty easy to figure out. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and, right? Give you some context and then we'll move on. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1, 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and... Okay, and then you know it just repeats. Then we have a second section. The only thing to talk about in this second section is actually this part. This is introducing this idea of, I guess, I don't know how to say it other than like double voicing, right? There's multiple voices, more than one voice on one line. So the best way to explain this, I think, is if you can imagine singers, right? You might have a bass and a tenor, and then an alto and a soprano. In this case, only 3 of those voices are represented. The bottom note here, this is the bass, this is the tenor, this is the soprano, okay? If you don't know what those words mean, it's just 3 different singers. Bass is the lowest singer, tenor is the next lowest singer, soprano is the highest singer. So basically what happens here, you'll notice that you have a quarter rest right here on this half note, above the half note. You're like, what does this mean? Well, it's really applying to the second voice. It's applying to the tenor. And it's basically an instruction that the tenor, when he begins this measure, is going to wait 1 beat and then come in on beat 2. Meanwhile, the bass is going to immediately enter on beat 1 and hold through beat 2. And lastly, the soprano is just going to sing what is written here on the soprano line, like they always do. No, I'm just kidding. I always like to pick on sopranos. So here's what it looks like in practice. 1 and 2 and 3 and so the effect of this is basically the lowest voice enters on beat 1 and holds. The upper voice for the left hand joins on beat 2 and holds. On beat 3, the tenor, the second voice, is still holding, and the lower voice, the bass, re-articulates. So you have a harmony the whole time, or at least for beat 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and it sounds like this put together. 1 and 2 and 3 and there's a little harmony there. 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3. So it's a little richer harmonically because there's more notes going on. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. That's how to do that. You also have that happen here. So look at the 2 rests, right? Tenor enters on beat 3. 1 and 2 and 3. And so notice I have a harmony. I have 2 notes on the bottom here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Anyway, I think that's it for that piece. Then we have totally different subject, a new way of subdividing. And this is my only example for this, right? I need to talk to you about triplets because you are going to see some triplets in beginner music sometimes. A triplet is what you're looking at right here. It looks like an 8th note, except for there's 3 of them, but it's beamed like an 8th note. It's got 1 beam. And I should probably clarify, 8th notes can have a single flag, or groups of them can be beamed like this. And it's a notation clarity thing as to whether or not, like which one it's which, okay? So you'll see the triplet uses the 8th note beaming, but then it's got this little 3 here, and the 3 is letting you know that you're going to have 3 notes in the space of 2. So it would be 3 notes in the space of what would normally be 2 8th notes. That's my best way I can explain this, okay? So now the effect of this means that the triplet, the 3 notes of the triplet are actually going to be the equivalent to a quarter note. And it sounds like this. Well, we have to have a way of counting this, and this is where a lot of people aren't really thinking, I think, far enough out when they pick their syllables, because a lot of people like to say 1 and a 2, 1 and a 2. Or in this case, it'll be 2 and a 1, right? Also, we should mention we're in 2/4. So 2/4, 2 quarter notes per measure. Quarter note gets the beat. So this is beat 2. this is beat 1, this is beat 2. So we have to come up with some counting syllables, and I'm saying we should not use the word and. And the reason that we don't want to use the word and is because it's very important that the word and represents the halfway, or at least this is what I suggest, okay? The and represents the halfway point between the beat. You use and when you're splitting a beat 2 ways. When you're splitting a beat 3 ways, that's not going to line up. So I like to use unique syllables for that. I didn't come up with these. I was taught these by someone who's really, really good. O, let. 2 O-let. Okay? So that's what I use. And so that frees the and up. And believe it or not, later on, we'll discuss 2 against 3 polyrhythm counting, where you can actually weave the and between these 2 syllables, and it will still be at the same exact point. Much more advanced subject for another day, but that's one of the reasons why I'm keeping the and reserved, because I need to be able to say 2 O and let, because that's how I can work out polyrhythms later. So if you need the reason, that's the reason. So anyway, in order to figure out how this triplet feels against this first quarter note, we should actually count this first quarter note using triplets as well. So 1 O let goes here too. And then you go like this. 1 O let, 2 O let, 1 O let. Okay, that's how to basically get this off the ground. And it's very helpful, but not entirely, because at some point we have eighth notes again, and we're not going to do the whole polyrhythm thing here because it's just not necessary. So instead, this is an important lesson where I say you can't use subdivision on everything. And so what you really need to do when you're subdividing is you need to have the composer's original pulse and time signature in mind, right? So if you are counting, like let's say you're counting 2, 4, and you're saying 1 and 2 and, well, technically you're counting eighth notes. The composer means for you to count quarter notes. He means for you to count, or she means for you to count 2 quarter notes a measure. That's how it's actually supposed to be felt. That's very important. So in order to count this 2 quarter notes a measure, I need to get to the point where I can say this. 1, 2, 1, 2, right? So you just use the O-lets or the ands or anything. Really, they're just training wheels to help you be proportional just on the parts that need it. But ultimately, you need to be able to step back and feel the quarter note. And that's going to allow you to switch back and forth between groups of 2 and groups of 3. So this is the piece where I really start to introduce that concept, that lesson to people. And one of the ways that I do this is I try to get students to actually move their other hand at the same time. And I have them do this. I'll have them go 1 O let, 2 O let, 1 O let, 2, and then switch to the other kind of counting. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and, right? I keep this hand moving. It taps every time there's a beat. It taps. And the space of the beat is occupied by this vertical distance. It just gives you like this visual. This is how big a beat is. So if I'm going to go triplet like that compared to, right? So there's a difference. When you do the eighth notes, you'll do a note here and then a note on the top and then a note on the bottom and then on the top. Okay, but the triplet doesn't feel like that. That visual is very helpful. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And that's how to get something like this off the ground. And another thing that it helps with is, the arm thing in particular, is it helps you feel the triplet as 4 notes in succession. Short notes in music, short notes push to long ones. So we have these. So like probably the most common mistake I see on triplets would be to front load the triplet, squeeze it too close to the front of the beat, and then wait on the last note. So a lot of students play it like this. Right? That's actually not the right rhythm. We need to spread that triplet out a bit, where it feels like 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, O, let, 3. So I say 1, 2, 3, 4 because I'm counting how many notes it feels like. That's how it's got to feel. So when you do the visual, 1 O, let, 2 O, let, 1 O, let, 2, it helps you to spread it out and actually make sure that you don't play it too fast. Anyway, the rest of the piece is just eighth notes, actually pretty easy. All right, so moving right along, I'm going to check how many pieces I have left. Yeah, we're getting to the end here. A few more pieces. So this is 3/8. So this is our first chance to count something other than the quarter note. What are we counting? We're counting the eighth note, 3 eighth notes per measure. So if you look at the left hand, note that these are not triplets. This is actually 3 eighth notes. This is worth the total of, Sometimes my iPad bugs out. I cannot help that. But basically what I'm trying to show you here is that these 3 eighth notes, which are beamed together, and they're beamed together on purpose, are the equivalent of a dotted quarter, and that's important. So the dotted quarter is the maximum beat value that you can actually have in a measure of 3/8. Otherwise, this is not a challenging piece at all, but just to kind of understand that I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and there's no, I'm not saying and anywhere, because eighth notes don't automatically mean and. We use and when we split a beat 2 ways. We're in 3/8. We have 3 eighth notes per measure. We don't have to split any beat 2 ways or 3 ways or anything. We just have to count normally. So it's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay? And let me go a little faster for you so you can feel the music. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. There's a rest there. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. There, that's what I was trying to do. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay? I'm going to go on just because I don't want to run out of time. All right, so this piece, I chose to follow the previous one we just looked at. This is a lot more complicated version of understanding 3/8. So now you're going to notice the appearance of 16th notes, and you have 2 16th notes for every 1/8 note. And we have unique syllables for when we would count 16th notes in quarter or in 4/4 time, but we're in 3/8 time. So this is probably not at all what you're expecting. So we have 3. So let's go ahead and count the left hand. 1, and then we have 2, 3. So because the 8th note breaks down naturally into 16th notes, that is how we subdivide 8th notes, is we count 16th notes. And in this case, because the 8th note pulse is getting the number, the main number is being assigned to the 8th note pulse, that means our ands are going to apply to the 16th notes. And so this and lines up with this note, this number lines up with this note, and this and lines up with this note. And so you're going to say 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. Okay. So if a student doesn't actually go through the process of saying this and figuring this out, their piece is often going to sound like this. What's wrong with this? Well, this is the right way to play it. Can you tell the difference between... That's the wrong way. Here's the right way. Sorry. So I would say. Right? What's the difference? Well, in one case, I'm counting in 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3. And in one case, I'm not really counting at all. I'm just doing whatever I feel like, which ends up being position-based. And just because the way that this is actually broken up, it feels like 2 pulses. It's not. This is wrong, but I'm just showing you. 1, 2, 1. Oops, let me turn that off. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Right? That's the wrong way to do it, but that's how everyone's going to want to do it unless they go through the process of saying 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. And that actually is crucial to understanding this piece. I picked this piece for that reason. I want to make sure that you can feel basically notes, like faster notes that start on an offbeat in 3/8 time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1. And this piece is pretty cool because it introduces some variations. So check this out. This looks complicated, but it's really not. We have a 16th rest, double flag. Actually, that's an 8th rest, right? 1 flag for 8th note or 8th rest, 2 flags for 16th note or 16th rest. So what's happening here is we have 1, and then after a 16th note rest has elapsed, because the 16th rest, that's half the count of the pulse, of the measure. We're counting in 3. 1, 2, 3. Each number represents an 8th note. This is half an 8th note, which means our and is going to go on that. Our 2 is going to go on that. Our and is going to go on that. And that's how it works. And it sounds like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 faster. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 1. So it's pretty cool, right? And then lastly, I'll show you the last measure here. You're gonna have to do that same thing. 1, oops, another bug. It's because I'm a lefty. That's like most of the problem, I think. 1 and 2 and. This is a quarter. It's actually going to last the rest of the measure. This is going to coincide right with the third beat. So this measure is going to sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and. 1 and 2 and 3. I didn't mean to hold the C the first time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and then you're off. And also you have a fermata, which means to hold longer than normal, although we don't really need to go over that in this video. So this is a good example of a measure that students get wrong unless they count this particular measure. And it's because there's multiple layers of rhythm going on and the notation is a little foreign. But it's really not hard. It's not hard. It's just foreign. All right, so moving on to the next subject, we have 6/8 time. So 6/8 time, let me actually do one thing before I continue. I want to make sure I am not disturbed by anyone. So I'm going to put on my do not disturb. And then I'm going to flip my camera back. There we go. All right, so this piece is in 6/8 and it's got tied notes. 6/8, 6 eighth notes per measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Every word you say represents an eighth note. 1, oops, again. I like to zoom in, but it doesn't want to keep me zoomed in. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And actually, let me zoom in less. This is how this is going to work, right? So that's a quarter. It gets 2 counts when we're counting eighth notes. This is a dotted quarter. It gets 3 counts, and then it's also tied to the 4th count. So that right hand's sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Meanwhile, the left hand is just doing an arpeggiated triad. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is very helpful. That's how you would figure out a piece like this. The piece isn't particularly fast, so it's fine to just always count it in 6. I think probably for performance, you'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1. Although it gets a little unwieldy. And this is where we have to talk about the fact that 6/8 is actually a compound meter. And so whenever you have a 2 or a 3 or a 4 on the top number for your time signature, that's referring to a simple meter. And simple meter means that every pulse naturally breaks down into 2 divisions. So we use eighth notes. So going back, even 3/8, I think is considered simple meter because each pulse naturally breaks down into, each pulse is an eighth note, naturally breaks down into 2/16, right? But in 2/4, each quarter note would naturally break down into 2/8, and the triplet would be the exception. So with that in mind, let's go to the spring song one more time, and let's talk about 6/8. So 6/8, and also you'll see sometimes 9/8 and 12/8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It does not roll off the tongue. The way I like to think about it is I like to think of when you actually count 6/8 using 6 pulses. So this is very much unlike simple meter. When you count 6/8 using 6 pulses, I feel like that is subdividing. I feel like that's the subdivided view by default. That's not the actual way you're supposed to count it. Probably for most pieces, especially those that go fast that are in 6/8, they're really meant to be felt in 2. And so this is where we get into the compound versus simple meter distinction. I know this is a little bit high level, but I'm going to try to explain it. So in simple meter, each pulse breaks down naturally into 2 divisions. In compound meter, each pulse breaks down naturally into 3 divisions. So let's go to like a white space for just a second and compare 2/4 against 6/8. In 2/4, you could have a quarter note, and each of those quarter notes breaks down into 2 eighth notes naturally. Okay, I know you can have a triplet, but that means something different here. But in 6/8, you can have a dotted quarter note. which breaks down naturally into three 3/8 notes, which is what's happening in this piece. They both have 2 pulses, but a 2/4 piece would be like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And a 6/8 piece would be like 1, 2, 1, 2. You know, it just has a different feel. It feels like it's lilting or something, better expressed in a piece of music than my example just now, but here's what that's going to sound like. And so basically, actually, before I say that, the first pulse and the 4th pulse will basically be converted to your dotted quarters, and that's what you count 1, 2 with. 1, 2. So you have to really know your music and everything because there's a lot that you're going to play without saying anything. But again, very important musical step to unraveling or exploring your musicianship. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Faster. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So we start to get into more of what the composer likely intends, right? So, I mean, I might not be right about this, where I say 6/8 can be best thought of as a subdivided way of counting 2, but that's how I think of it. I think it's very helpful. So most of the time when you see 6/8 pieces, very much especially when the piece is fast, you're probably meant to feel it in 2. So here's a great example of that. Wild Rider, you're meant to feel this piece in 2, for sure. Also on this, we have something called a pickup. A pickup note is an incomplete measure. So if we're counting 6/8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If we're counting 6/8 and we back up 1/8 note, that's going to be count 6 of the previous measure. It's an incomplete measure. It's actually not the first measure of this piece because you have to have a complete measure to start counting measures. So the arrow notes the first measure of the piece. So this is not a full measure, just so you know. All right, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Both hands. 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Does not roll off the tongue. You want to know how this piece is meant to go? It's supposed to go like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Well, without mistakes. Let me slow down. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And of course, once you get to the point where you're no longer subdividing, you've used subdivision to basically make proportions correct, rhythms are correct, you can switch over to the metronome and let the metronome do this for you, so long as you can feel it in 2. If you can do this, 1, 2, 1, 2, then you're ready for a metronome to do the same thing. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. All right, last 2 examples are dealing with 16th notes in regular simple meter. Okay, so 16th notes, this is where we do need to go ahead and introduce those new syllables. And I'm actually going to do it here because this is the first time that we have 4 of them. So we need something between, because look at the 8th note, right? Your 8th note's already counted 1 and, you know the 8th note would be counted 1 and in 4/4, 2/4, or whatever. So we need something to map these notes out. And so we're going to actually use the syllables E and That's the most common. It rolls off the tongue. You can say it fast. 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a. Very helpful to get this down. 1 E and a. So this part's going to sound like this. 1 E and oops, that's supposed to be a 2. 2 E and 1. Right? That's how to count this. 1 E and 2 E and 1. It's helpful to speak it as clear and precisely as you can. You can put the D on the and. 1 E and a 2. 1 E and a 2 E and a 1. And that's how to get your 16th notes going. And so if we back up, actually let's go ahead and back up to the beginning of the piece and understand this in context. So we have another pickup. This is worth an 8th note, which means this is starting on the and of 2. So that means that this is an and then all of these are 1 E and a. So it can get kind of tedious, but it's just something that you do. You don't have to do this for the whole piece. You just do it for a small part, a representative section, get the rhythm in your mind, and once you have it, you can let the counting go or switch over to the metronome or whatever. And 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and That's how to feel this. I know it's busy, but the second that you can let go of the E and does and just feel the eighth note. That would sound like this. We'll talk more about this in my intermediate version of this video, but just so you know, and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. That's how to get this off the ground. And 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and a 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. So missed a note. I can't speak it that fast, so I do have to count over the eighth note, but you can use the 16th notes at least to figure out your rhythms initially. And a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2 and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1, 2. If I did eighth notes for that same passage, and 1 and 2 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 and 1 and 2. Then finally, I can use quarter notes. So we have and 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's the way that the piece is meant to go. Tired. Sorry about that. Anyway, so that's how you would look at something like this. And then this is our very last example because I need to show you dotted eighth notes into sixteenths, into quarters or whatever. How do you figure something like this out? Remember, your dotted eighth note is going to be worth 3 sixteenths. So this is a 75%, 25% split. That's how I like to think of that. 75%. So 3 things on this note: 3E and 3E and like that. That's how you actually figure out this rhythm. Of course, we're starting on a pickup note. You'll get better at spotting pickup notes. 3, E, and Okay, so how do you make this correct and proportional? Well, you take a small representative section of this piece, like the first part of this piece, right? And you feel all the quarter notes in terms of sixteenths. 3E and a 1E and a 2E and a until the rhythm gets set in your head. 3E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 1E and a 2E and E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a, okay? Now at some point, you will be able to feel that this last note right here really just gets squeezed right before the next pulse. And once you do this enough, 3E and a 1, 3E and a 1, can you do it without counting? Can you keep the quarter notes proportional? 3E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 1E and a. Right? 3, a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That's how you get your feel of this piece. 3, a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Oh, and another thing is, this is kind of funny. A lot of students, when they get used to the dotted rhythm, finally, they're like, oh, I can feel it. I can hear it. 3, a 1, I can feel it. Then they can't undot the rhythm for stuff like this. They'll do like, but this is not dotted. So you still have to be able to tap into that eighth note. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 1, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, right? Let me play just a little bit of this for you, and then I will wrap up. 3 and a 1E and a 2, 3, 1E and a 2, 3 and a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. I'll let you listen. Sorry. So on. Okay, so all of that can be worked out using this counting. So anyway, that is, I think, comprehensive enough for beginners and enough to really get you into the intermediate stuff just a little bit. I hope you found all of these examples helpful. If you do enjoy my teaching style, it's very data-like, right? It's like black and white. It's just ones or zeros or whatever. That's just how I am. That's how I teach. I work well with those kinds of people. So if you enjoy this style, you enjoy this presentation style, definitely check out my program. and I will see you in the next video. Bye.